play is set in the European nation of Denmark, at the castle of Elsinore. On a cold, stormy night, Officer Francisco is posted as the manor's watchman when he hears footsteps in the darkness. He cries out in alarm, but it turns out to only be his replacement, Bernardo. Relieved yet exhausted, Francisco decides to turn in. Soon, Bernardo is joined by fellow watchmen Marcellus and Horatio, one of Prince Hamlet's friends from school. Quietly, Marcellus and Bernardo tell Horatio that in the late hours of the night, the ghost of the late King Hamlet stalks the ramparts of the castle. Horatio is unsure, but suddenly the apparition approaches the three men. Marcellus and Bernardo urge Horatio to speak to it, since he is a scholar, but the ghost quickly disappears. Terrified, Horatio admits that the specter does resemble the late king, donning the same armor and demeanor that the monarch wore in battles with foreign nations. He believes that this spirit could be a harbinger of military misfortune for Denmark. He then tells the story of King Hamlet's conquering of Norwegian lands and notes that Norway's young Prince Fortinbras now desires to reconquer that territory. The ghost suddenly reappears, and Horatio makes attempts to speak with it, but the apparition vanishes at the rooster's crowing, the first sign of dawn. Horatio says that they need to inform Prince Hamlet of his father's ghost, because if it truly is the late king, he will speak to his son. King Claudius holds a royal court with his courtiers. He explains that though he mourns the loss of his dear brother, he hopes to balance a nation's grief with happiness for his marriage to Gertrude, his brother's widow. He also mentions a letter from Fortinbras demanding the conquered territory be returned to Norway, and sends Cornelius and Voltiman to speak to the King of Norway, Fortinbras's uncle. After he finishes speaking, he talks to Lord Chamberlain Polonius and his son Laertes, who requests permission to return to France where he had been before Claudius's coronation. Polonius and the king grant his request. Claudius then approaches Prince Hamlet, who is still dressed in dark mourning clothes, and asks why he is sorrowful. Gertrude tells him to stop wearing the black clothing, but Hamlet gloomily replies that his exterior is only a poor reflection of the depths of his grief. Claudius says that fathers die and sons mourn the loss, but to grieve for too long is not manly. He tells Hamlet to see him as a father, and reminds him that he will eventually be king. Due to all of this, Claudius expresses his wish for Hamilton not to return to his studies in Wittenberg, which his mother agrees with. Hamlet begrudgingly obeys, and the two monarchs organize a grand celebration for the prince. After they leave, Hamlet bemoans the fact that suicide is a sin, and laments the death of his father and the hasty union of his mother and uncle. He recounts how in love the two were, and curses the fact that his inferior uncle is now acting as a father. Suddenly, Horatio, Marcellus, and Bernardo enter the room, cheering up Hamlet considerably. He asks why the gang has come to Denmark, and though Horatio says it was for the late king's funeral, Hamlet mutters that he probably came for the wedding. The group then informs Hamlet of the appearance of his father's spirit, and Hamlet agrees to keep watch with them that night. At his house, Laertes prepares for his voyage, bidding farewell to his sister Ophelia. He warns her against a partnership with Hamlet, who is too high class-wise to love her appropriately, and may never be able to marry her because of his position in the monarchy. He tells her to guard her heart, which Ophelia agrees to, but admits is a bit hypocritical of him. He assures her, "Fear me not." Polonius arrives to see his son off, but delays his trip by giving him a tidal wave of advice, admonishing his son to think for himself, practice self-restraint, be kind but not vulgar to acquaintances, make new friends but keep the old, not act rashly but fight boldly if necessary, listen more than speak, dress appropriately, be careful with money, and to thine own self be true. Laertes departs with a final farewell to his family. Polonius asks Ophelia what Laertes told her, and she brushes it off as something about Hamlet. He then asks her about her relationship with the prince, and Ophelia states that Hamlet has professed his love for her. Fearful, Polonius echoes the advice of his son, saying that she is being deceived by the prince. Reluctantly, Ophelia agrees. Out in the cold, the three men wait for the ghost to appear. They are startled by the loud noises of the king's celebration, which Hamlet condemns as a ridiculous tradition that makes Denmark the laughingstock of Europe. The apparition appears to them and beckons the young prince to follow him. Hamlet is eager to go, but Horatio and Marcellus stop him, urging their friend to be wary of the ghost, as it could lead him to danger. Frustrated and without regard for his own life, Hamlet shakes off his friends and accompanies the spirit. Horatio and Marcellus, worried about Hamlet's safety and bad omens for the nation, deliberate for a moment before deciding to follow Hamlet and the ghost. The ghost begins to speak to Hamlet, who agrees to heed his words. The apparition admits his identity as the dead king, and tells of his binding fate, forcing him to walk the earth at night and burn in purgatory in the day, a fate he is bound to. He then tells of his untimely murder, messy, deceptive, cold-blooded murder, and asks Hamlet to take revenge before launching into the story. At the time of his death, the kingdom was told that their monarch was bitten by a poisonous snake, but the killer was actually his brother Claudius.
What?
With fancy prose and gifts, he seduced Queen Gertrude, leading her into an incestuous union. Then, one day, while King Hamlet was relaxing in an orchard, Claudius poured poison into his ears, causing a swift death and leaving the king's earthly problems unresolved. Back in the present, the king bemoans his fate and begs his son to avenge him somehow, but not to harm Gertrude, since she is living with what she has done. As the sun rises, King Hamlet fades away, leaving Hamlet to curse the wretched monarchy. Horatio and Marcellus arrive and excitedly ask what happened, but shaken from the revelation, Hamlet withholds the information. He then tells them that they must swear on his sword that they will not tell anyone of the encounter or what Hamlet is doing. The two hesitate, but the king's spirit implores them to swear, so they do it. Hamlet tells his friends that he may do some things that seem mad, but they should never ever seem like they know his motives. With newfound responsibility on all of their shoulders, the three men return to the court together.